It started like any other Tuesday. I was working from home, camped at the dining table surrounded by 2 coffee mugs, a stack of spreadsheets, and a half-eaten turkey sandwich I'd forgotten about since noon. My wife Hannah had left the house that morning in her usual power outfit, pressed navy slacks, white blouse, hair in a neat bun, and the kind of heels that clicked with intent. She told me she had a business lunch with some of the new people involved in her restaurant expansion. It wasn't unusual. Hannah had always been career-driven, the kind of woman who'd rather discuss quarterly goals than celebrity gossip. That ambition was part of what I loved about her. We'd built our fast-casual restaurant chain together from scratch. What started as a single food truck in Charleston became a recognizable name across the Carolinas. I ran logistics and operations. She was the face and strategy. It worked. We worked. So when she said she had a meeting downtown, I didn't blink. Around 2:15 p.m., I got a notification on my phone while I was drafting a pricing proposal for a new vendor. Instagram. I wasn't someone who scrolled a lot during the day, but I had my notifications on just in case one of our marketing partners tagged the restaurant. But this wasn't that. The notification was from Lila, someone I hadn't heard from in over a year. She used to work at one of Hannah's locations and had moved to New York. We followed each other out of politeness, but I couldn't recall the last time she posted anything. I tapped the story out of idle curiosity. It was a blurry, artsy snap *T, a wine glass half full with a deep red Pinot, soft candlelight bouncing off the table. Just barely in the corner of the frame, a man's arm rested casually across the table. The shirt was crisp and white, cuff rolled back just enough to show a sleek black leather-strapped watch with a silver bezel. I stared at it longer than I should have, trying to place what felt so familiar. Then it hit me. Jason Miller. He was one of our original investors, flashy, confident, always talking about private equity like it was a competitive sport. He had a way of leaning in too close and complimenting Hannah a little too often. At one point, I chalked it up to his personality. But seeing that watch, that exact watch, in this photo, on this day, it stopped me cold. Especially because Hannah had said she'd be with coworkers, team leads, kitchen managers. Jason wasn't on the operations side. He hadn't been hands-on in almost a year. I stared at the photo again. The wine glass. The single plate with a smudge of sauce. No clutter. No signs of a group lunch. And no Hannah, but I had a gut feeling. A tightness in my chest that wouldn't go away. At 4:27, I heard the front door. Hannah came in, balancing her keys, phone, and bag like she always did. But something was off. Her blouse was untucked on one side and her blazer was folded over her arm like it had been stuffed into a bag or tossed over a chair. Her lipstick was faded and her bun was looser than usual, strands falling around her face. She looked exhausted. "Hey," I said, glancing up from my laptop, trying to sound casual. "How was the lunch?" She didn't meet my eyes as she set her bag down. "Fine. Long boring." Her tone was clipped and she headed straight to the stairs. Not even a kiss or the usual rundown of who ordered what and how the new district manager didn't understand the menu flow. I waited a beat, then followed her with my eyes. "Hey, wasn't Lila at your lunch today?" She froze on the third stare. "Lila," she echoed, turning halfway to look at me. "No. Why would she be?" I shrugged, still casual. "Just saw her post something. Looked like the same place." Her expression changed just for a second. A twitch of the lips, a hard blink. "I haven't seen her in forever. She lives in New York now. Maybe she's in town?" "Doubt it." She turned and started up the stairs again, her voice tighter now. "Ryan, why are you checking up on me?" "I'm not. It was just a weird coincidence." I don't know what answer I expected, but the sudden defensiveness wasn't it. She hadn't even asked what the photo showed or why I brought it up. It was a full 180 accusation, not curiosity. She reached the top of the stairs and called out without turning around, "You always do this. Try to find a problem when there isn't one." That's when it hit me like a punch to the gut. The sharpness. The dismissal. I'd heard that tone before, but never from her. Not like that. I sat there on the edge of the dining chair, my laptop screen glowing forgotten. My pulse was louder than the HVAC humming through the vents. She hadn't even tried to lie convincingly. She had deflected, twisted it back on me, called me paranoid without calling me paranoid. And now I couldn't stop thinking about the last few months. How many times had she been vague about where she was going? How many overnight strategy retreats had popped up out of nowhere? How often had her phone never lit up around me, always face down on the counter, passcode protected? I wanted to believe it was nothing. But that photo, that stupid, blurry, artsy snap *T with a wine glass and a sliver of a man's wrist, It cracked something open in my brain. Something I didn't want to see. I pulled my phone back out, took another look. The caption on Lila's story read, "Same city, same habits wineglass." That meant she was in town. And that meant Hannah lied. Not maybe, not possibly. She lied. I closed the app and stared at the blank Word document on my laptop. All the numbers and invoices I'd been obsessing over that morning suddenly felt trivial. It was like someone had shifted the foundation under my feet without warning. She told me it was a business lunch, a group thing. No mention of Jason, no mention of Lila. And now my brain wouldn't stop spinning. What did I miss? What else had she hidden? Later that evening, she acted like nothing happened. She made a frozen stir-fry, said she had to answer some emails, and then spent an hour on her laptop in the bedroom. Door closed. I sat in the living room, phone in my lap, heart hammering. I didn't know what to do with what I was feeling. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was dread. A slow, creeping dread I couldn't shake. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling while Hannah, a few feet away, scrolled her phone in the dark. The light from her screen reflected off the wall in faint pulses, the way headlights passed through a closed window. I could hear her occasional tapping, the sound of her fingers sliding over glass. Messages? Social media? Work emails, like she'd say? I turned my back to her and closed my eyes, but the weight in my chest wouldn't let me rest. It didn't matter how I shifted, how I tried to breathe it away. My mind kept going back to that photo, that one quiet image that had cut through months of denial like a scalpel. When I finally drifted off sometime past 3 a.m., my dreams were jittery, disjointed. I kept seeing her in a restaurant I didn't recognize, always just slipping out of view, laughing with someone I couldn't see. By 7 a.m., I was already downstairs making coffee. And while the pot gurgled and hissed behind me, I started listing them. All the little things. The signs I'd brushed off, excused, rationalized because I trusted her. Because I loved her. Like how 3 months ago she started staying out later. First twice a week, then more often. She always had a reason. Team-building dinners, new investor briefings, strategic planning sessions. And I believed her. She worked in the restaurant business, after all. Late nights came with the job. Except she used to text me updates. Little things like, running late, don't wait up Red Heart, or long meeting. I owe you a rain check. But those had stopped. Then there were the overnights. The first time, she said she had one too many glasses of wine after an offsite and crashed at her friend Monica's place rather than drive. I remember being relieved, actually. I even texted back, "Smart call. Love you." I didn't question it. But Monica had moved to Charlotte. She must have forgotten I knew that. Then her phone, which once buzzed freely on the nightstand, suddenly stopped lighting up unless she was holding it. Notifications hidden. A new passcode. At first, she said it was because of corporate policy changes around company devices. I bought it. Her laptop, too, always closed now. Password protected. Not just locked when idle but manually closed. If I walked into the room, she'd fold it shut in one smooth motion like she was brushing away crumbs. One time I joked, "Top secret recipes?" She just smiled and said, "Can't let you see all my million-dollar ideas." She used to want me in the loop. Now I was clearly out of it. Our conversations shifted, too. We used to debrief each other on everything. Not just work, but random stuff. People from high school who resurfaced on Facebook, weird customer stories, future vacation ideas. But over the last few months, our words had thinned into surface-level noise. She started responding to my stories with, or "that's crazy," like she wasn't really there. Emotionally, she'd become a silhouette, still present in form but fading in color. I poured my coffee and sat in silence at the kitchen island, staring at the pale granite counter. There were so many things I didn't want to admit to myself until now. Like how I'd started doing most of the work with the kids. Not just the logistics, school drop-offs, making dinner, helping Mason with his Lego sets, but the emotional labor, too. When Ava had a meltdown about her science fair project, it was me who stayed up with her past midnight. When Cole got into it with his basketball coach, it was me he came to. Hannah had started checking out. And I'd noticed. But I told myself she was just tired. Just busy. Just focused. It wasn't until I looked at our calendar that the truth started to click. 3 overnight strategy retreats in the last 2 months. One of them in Charleston, another in Greenville, and one in Savannah. When I asked for details, she'd always be vague. Oh, it was at a conference center. I can't even remember the name. The thing is, Hannah's memory is sharp. She remembers every investor name, every vendor contract. She once corrected a supplier's invoice from 6 months prior from memory. But when it came to these trips, she was conveniently foggy. And I had been blind. I'd accepted the silence, the distance, the red flags dressed up as logistics. Because the truth is, you never expect the person you build your life with to start disappearing while they're still standing right in front of you. By the time Hannah came downstairs that morning, I had already made breakfast for the kids and packed their lunches. She walked in wearing joggers and a loose hoodie, her hair in a lazy braid, no makeup, tired eyes. She poured her coffee like nothing had happened. "Morning," she said softly. I studied her face, looking for something. A flicker of guilt, maybe. But her expression was practiced, worn-in, familiar. You could tell she'd had a lifetime of mornings like this. I nodded. "Morning." We sat in silence while the kids debated cereal versus waffles at the table. Later that day, I opened the family credit card statements. Nothing too invasive, just our shared card, the one we'd always used for household stuff. But suddenly there were charges that didn't make sense. A luxury hotel in Charleston during one of her overnight retreats. Dinner for 2 at a steakhouse in Asheville. A spa charge in Savannah. None of these places were on her travel reports for the restaurant business. I knew because I handled our operations. I knew what vendors were in which cities, who was handling which site. And yet, these trips had no business trail, no receipts to reimburse, no follow-up notes. Just her moving through cities we didn't discuss, leaving behind traces she probably thought I'd never notice. That night, I sat on the edge of our bed long after she'd fallen asleep, just staring at the floor. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed more. Something undeniable. Something she couldn't twist or dodge. Because I knew if I went to her with just suspicions, she'd spin it. Make it about my insecurities. Gaslight me back into submission. I'd seen her do it before, not to me, but to others. To employees who brought her concerns. To her sister during a family fight. She was smart, confident, persuasive. And I couldn't afford to be wrong. So I waited. And I watched. The distance between us wasn't measured in feet anymore. It was days of silence, missing glances, jokes that landed flat. She didn't reach for my hand in bed. Didn't ask about my day. When she did speak, it was all logistics. Pick up Mason, move the meeting, order the uniforms. It was like we were running a business, not a marriage. By the end of the week, I had a note saved on my phone with dates, locations, charge amounts, and how they aligned with her supposed work schedule. And the thing is, the deeper I looked, the more obvious it became. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was a pattern. A slow burn of deception that had been eating away at us from the inside while I kept fixing surface cracks. I stared at the last entry on my list. Date, Friday. Charge, restaurant, Columbia, South Carolina. Time, 1:36 p.m. Card used, company account. Hannah's explanation, lunch with vendor team, new rollout. Actual, no vendor teams were scheduled in Columbia that week. And Jason Miller had flown in that day. That was it. The final piece. Whatever this was, it wasn't going away. It wasn't a mistake or a rough patch. It was something else entirely. And now I had to find out just how far it went. The following Wednesday, I told Hannah I had a supplier walkthrough in Columbia, a routine thing, just checking the build-out progress on one of the upcoming store locations. It wasn't a lie, not entirely. I was supposed to go next week. I just moved it up on the schedule, or at least, that's what I told her. She didn't ask a single follow-up question. "Okay, just text me if you're running late," she said that morning, kissing me lightly on the cheek like she always used to. But the gesture felt forced. Too mechanical. Like she was playing a version of herself she thought I still believed in. She had no idea I was headed straight to one of the restaurants she claimed to be developing. Hannah had mentioned it offhand last week, said she and some of her new investors were coordinating renovations at a location near Lexington. Her story was vague, but I had filed the details away. Meeting with the contractor Tuesday, planning menu trials midweek, maybe bringing Jason to tour the space. That last part had slipped out quickly. She didn't repeat it, but I remembered. So there I was, sitting in my truck in the back parking lot of the strip mall location, waiting. Her car was already there, silver Audi Q5, The one she insisted on leasing last fall even though our company had perfectly good vehicles. The restaurant itself was still under construction, a skeleton crew of workers outside, but no one milling near the front. I circled around to the back lot where a side entrance led to the offices. It was propped open by a wedge of cardboard and a bucket. Typical construction mess. I knew that office. I'd helped pick the floor plans. I'd stood in that exact hallway with our regional manager 2 months ago, going over plumbing specs. Now I was crouched beside a crate of tile samples, heart pounding so hard I could hear it echo in my ears. Through the crack in the door, I saw her. She was sitting on the edge of a table, laughing. Jason stood in front of her, his back turned to me. One arm rested on the table beside her thigh. The other, it was around her waist. And they weren't talking about menus. She leaned into him, close enough that her forehead brushed his collarbone. Her voice was low, affectionate. Jason said something I couldn't hear, and her fingers brushed his wrist, right over that ridiculous, expensive watch. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there, feeling like the entire air had been *ked out of my chest. I don't know how long I watched, maybe 5 seconds, maybe 20, but it was enough. More than enough. She wasn't even pretending. This wasn't a flirtation. It wasn't some ambiguous workplace chemistry. This was Macy. Physical, emotional, layered in familiarity. I stepped back slowly, making sure my boots didn't crunch on the loose gravel. Got in my truck, drove 2 blocks, pulled into an empty church lot and sat there in silence for a full 10 minutes. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was stunned. I kept thinking, so this is it. This is what it feels like to find the thing you were afraid of. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was how unsurprised I was. I drove home, waited until the house was empty, then opened the laptop I used for bookkeeping. Our company credit cards were managed through an admin portal. Hannah had access, but I was the primary. I knew the passwords. I knew the routing. And now I had questions. I pulled the last 6 months of statements. Hotel bookings across the Carolinas, boutique properties in Charleston, Columbia, Asheville. All booked under the business account. All at times she claimed to be attending conferences. Receipts from luxury stores, watches, scarves, designer cologne. All charged to client gifts. Dinner tabs over $200 at restaurants I hadn't heard of. Many of them in cities where she had vendor meetings. There were no vendors listed for those dates. I cross-checked the charges with her Google Calendar. Nothing matched. These weren't working lunches. They weren't strategy sessions. They were getaways. I found one entry labeled QC Site Visit, Savannah, from 3 weeks ago. That same weekend, the statement showed a 2-night stay at the Drayton Hotel. Champagne service. In-room massage. No business expenses filed afterward. No receipts turned in. Just the charge and silence. She hadn't even tried to hide it that well. That night, she came home late. Said the contractor was behind schedule, and she'd been stuck trying to sort out floor plans. She looked tired, convincingly so. Even wore a faint scuff on her blouse like she'd been working all day. I stared at her from the kitchen. "Everything okay?" I asked. She nodded, dropping her bag near the door. "Just exhausted." I poured her a glass of water. My hand didn't even shake. She drank it without looking at me. I watched her climb the stairs, every step echoing in my ears. Later that night, once she fell asleep, I opened her purse. Found her phone locked as always. But I wasn't looking for that. I pulled out a receipt folded in half and shoved into the side pocket. Maison Terrace, Columbia. Lunch for 2, $146.32. Signed by H. Carter. Dated the same day she said she was sampling new kitchen vendors. She'd signed the receipt without thinking. I flipped it over. A note written in small, looping handwriting. "Let's not waste the next hotel window, J." I stared at the paper for what felt like an hour. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It wasn't even betrayal. It was a lie that had become a routine. She'd built an entire second life inside ours, using our business, our money, our shared dreams as cover. And I finally saw it all for what it was. I needed to move. Not just for me, but for the kids. For the future of the company. For every ounce of dignity I still had left. So the next morning, I made 3 calls. First, to an attorney I'd met at a business seminar a year ago, a no-nonsense woman named Rebecca Yates, who specialized in small business protection during high-stakes divorces. Second, to our financial advisor, asking him to prepare a full audit of company expenses. And third, reluctantly, to a private investigator, a guy named Harris who had been recommended by a friend of a friend. I didn't want drama. I didn't want to explode our lives in one day. But I needed facts, documentation, neutral, hard proof that couldn't be twisted or softened. I met Harris at a coffee shop the following day and handed over everything I'd compiled: dates, receipts, photos, calendar screensh *TS. He nodded, quiet, professional. "I'll confirm what you already know," he said, "and I'll get the rest." 3 days later, I had it. Photos, reports, video stills. Hannah and Jason walking into the same hotel lobby, holding hands, her head resting on his shoulder in the elevator. Their cars parked side by side outside the Columbia restaurant multiple times. 1SH*T, her hand on his chest while he unlocked his door. The timestamp, 9:43 p.m., and then nothing for 10 hours. That was enough. It was more than enough. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of printouts, knowing nothing would ever be the same again. But for the first time in months, I felt something else underneath the heartbreak. Clarity. And that was the beginning of the end. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the printed photos from the investigator still spread out like some kind of sick game of memory. Each one told the same story from a different angle. Hannah's laugh, Jason's hand at the small of her back, their shadows under hotel hallway lights. If I hadn't known the context, I would have said they looked in love. Not sneaking, not scandalous, just normal, comfortable. That was what gutted me. She was comfortable with it. Whatever guilt she might have had early on had long since evaporated. They weren't clumsy or tense or careful. They were practiced. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't even clench my fists. The sadness had passed, and the disbelief was old news. What I felt now was surgical, cold, precise. That day, I met with Rebecca Yates, the attorney. We sat across from each other in her downtown office while she leafed through the documentation I'd brought. A neatly indexed folder with receipts, screensh *TS, photos, and a spreadsheet I'd built myself with dates and cross-referenced travel expenses. She took her time reviewing it, nodding occasionally, scribbling notes in the margins. "Do you want a file now?" she asked. "Or are you looking to negotiate first?" "File," I said without hesitation. "No warnings. No arguments. She's already burned the house down. I'm just walking out of the ashes." Rebecca looked up and held my gaze. "Have you talked to her at all about what you know?" "Not directly. Not yet." "Good," she said. "Let's keep it that way. No tipping off. No sudden confessions. Let her keep playing her hand." She explained the plan. We'd begin separation proceedings immediately. Given the scope of the affair, the misused business funds, and my role as the primary legal owner of the company, the process would be heavily weighted in my favor. That last part surprised me. "Hannah's a partner," I said. "At least in practice." Rebecca raised a brow. "Not on paper." It was true. Years ago, when we began expanding the business, I had taken advice from our accountant and had structured our LLC so that I held majority ownership. Hannah had signed on as a salaried employee with bonuses tied to performance, not equity. At the time, it had been for liability purposes. If something went wrong, we didn't want both of us exposed. She'd never once pushed back. Now it was my shield. Rebecca laid out the timeline. First, we'd quietly move assets into protected holding accounts. Not to hide money, but to prevent joint account bleeding or unauthorized withdrawals. Then, we'd alert our franchise manager and corporate attorney of the coming transition, without revealing the reason yet, just enough to stabilize operations. Finally, we'd serve her, formally and legally, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. It was about protecting our children, our employees, our livelihood. When I got home that evening, the house was dark. The kids were with my parents for the weekend, a spontaneous arrangement I'd suggested to Hannah earlier in the week. She hadn't even questioned it. I walked through each room in silence. Tidy, familiar, lived in. The air smelled faintly like her shampoo and the lavender candles she always left burning in the bathroom. For a second, I let my guard down. Let myself remember the years when this house felt full of laughter, of noise, of something unspoken and real. I went to our shared office and pulled the most recent bookkeeping reports. I wanted to be sure. What I found was worse than I'd expected. Personal purchases categorized under vague company expenses. Travel reimbursements with no attached receipts. Duplicate charges during investor trips. One for Hannah, one for Jason. The names were masked, the categories generic. But I knew what I was looking at now. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She had siphoned the company's resources for her affair. For months. I printed everything and added it to the growing file. The next morning, I met with our CFO, Andrew. We'd known each other since college. He'd helped me through more than one business crisis. This one was personal, but I needed his expertise. I handed him a condensed version of the documents. Told him I needed a clean internal audit. Every expense from the past 8 months flagged, categorized, and reviewed. He flipped through the folder, then looked up slowly. "This is bad," he said quietly. "I know. Does she know you know?" "No." He nodded, then leaned back. "Okay, I'll run this through under the pretense of routine due diligence. We'll mask the purpose. But Ryan, when this hits, it's going to get ugly." "I'm counting on it," I said. "Just not for me." That afternoon, I got a call from Harris, the investigator. "I've confirmed it," he said. "Jason Miller and your wife have had at least 6 known encounters over the last 2 months, most involving overnight stays. Their communications span both personal and professional channels, but there's no sign of separation between them. Anything financial? A few red flags. Jason paid for some travel, but many charges went through your company. I'm coordinating with a forensic accountant if you want to pursue that." I told him I'd be in touch. That night, Hannah came home later than usual again. She walked through the door with a bottle of wine and a tired smile. "Long day," she said, slipping off her heels. "One of the chefs quit, and we had to backfill last minute." I nodded, watching her unpack takeout from a white paper bag. She handed me a carton. Thai food. My favorite. The same one she'd brought home on our anniversary 3 years ago. Back when we didn't need excuses to share a meal. I watched her sit across from me, laughing about some ridiculous customer complaint. She didn't look guilty. Didn't look like someone unraveling. She looked comfortable. Like this was her version of normal. And for the first time, I saw her clearly. Not as the woman I'd married. Not as the mother of my kids. Not even as my business partner. But as someone who had made a choice. To lie. To steal. To turn the life we'd built together into a stage for a double act I wasn't even part of. So I ate the food. I smiled when appropriate. I laughed at the right beats. And 2 days later, she was served. Not at home. Not quietly. At work, during a corporate planning session in front of Jason and the other investors. The process server delivered the envelope straight to her hand. Jason looked up, eyes flicking between the seal and her face. She turned to me, the only other person in the room who knew what was coming, and her expression collapsed in real time. Confusion, shock, fear. Not guilt, not even remorse, just exposure. She opened the envelope and scanned the first page. Her breath hitched. She looked at me like I'd betrayed her. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked out, because I had nothing left to say. The divorce papers hit harder than I think she expected. At first, Hannah tried to keep her composure. She didn't reach out immediately after being served, no texts, no calls. For a few days, I actually thought she might try to go quietly. That maybe, deep down, she understood what she'd done. Maybe she'd take responsibility or, at the very least, spare us both the theatrical fallout. But that calm didn't last. By the end of the week, the emails started coming in. Subject lines like, "Can we talk?" And this doesn't have to be war. Paragraphs of soft-spoken justifications, each one wrapped in passive language. I made a mistake, and it got out of hand. And things haven't felt right between us for a while. She never once used the word affair. Not once. She still didn't think she had to name it. I ignored the emails. I wasn't interested in emotional explanations or half-baked reconciliations. The papers were filed, the audits were moving forward, and my attorney had already set court dates. We weren't going backward. When she finally showed up at the house, unannounced during one of her scheduled nights with the kids, I was ready. It was a Saturday just after lunch. The kids were in the backyard, Ava helping Mason collect cicada shells while Cole kicked a soccer ball against the fence. I heard the knock and knew immediately it was her. I opened the door. She stood on the porch in a navy jacket, her hair in a loose braid, sunglasses on. She looked like she was trying to appear pulled together. But there was a tightness in her mouth, something clenched and restless. "Ryan," she said, removing the sunglasses slowly. "Can we talk?" I stepped outside and pulled the door behind me. "About what?" She blinked at the coldness in my tone but didn't flinch. "You blindsided me." I tilted my head. "Did I?" "This is my family too," she said sharply. "My business too. You can't just push me out." "You already did that part," I said. "I just made it official." Her jaw tightened. "Look, I know things got complicated. But what you're doing is what you forced me to do," I interrupted. She looked like she was about to fire back, but she stopped herself. Took a breath. "I'm not the enemy, Ryan." "Then what are you?" That finally cracked her. Her face broke just slightly and her voice came out thinner than before. "We built this together. The restaurants. The house. The kids. You don't get to erase me." "I'm not erasing you," I said. "I'm drawing a line. One you already crossed." She didn't speak for a long time. Then, without looking at me, she asked, "Are the kids okay?" "They're confused. Sad. Ava doesn't talk about you." Cole stopped asking. "Mason," I paused. "Mason cried when you didn't tuck him in last week." She swallowed hard. Her eyes went glassy, but she didn't let the tears fall. "I want to see them more," she said quietly. "That's up to the court now," I replied. 2 weeks later, things got ugly. Her lawyer filed an emergency petition claiming she was being unfairly denied access to marital assets and parental rights. She alleged that she had played a foundational role in building the company, deserved a 50-50 split of both the business and custody. Rebecca and I had prepared for this. The company structure was ironclad. Hannah had been an employee, not a legal partner. She had no ownership stake, no shareholder rights, and her bonuses had been issued through W-2 payroll like every other manager. The court reviewed our filings and shut the claim down fast. But the custody battle wasn't so simple. Family court didn't care about betrayal, about affairs or emotions or pain. It cared about what was in the best interest of the children. And while I had been the primary caretaker for the last few months, Hannah was still their mother. She hadn't abandoned them. Not legally. We ended up in mediation. It was tense. Formal. Like business negotiations with your former spouse seated 6 feet away and a lawyer between you. Hannah played nice at first. Said she wanted joint custody, alternating weeks, collaborative holidays. Said she wanted to protect the routine. But I knew better. I knew how unpredictable she had become. How often she missed things lately. She didn't know Ava's homeroom teacher's name. Couldn't remember Cole's soccer practice schedule. Thought Mason was still scared of the dark even though he hadn't used a night light in over a year. I brought receipts. Literally. A calendar of school events I'd attended solo. Photos of permission slips signed only by me. Teacher emails, after-school pickups, therapy appointments, doctor visits, all handled by me. The mediator nodded slowly. Took notes. Eventually, the compromise was reached, primary physical custody to me with Hannah receiving scheduled visitations supervised at first until a stability review could be completed. It wasn't perfect, but it was the safest path forward. The kids didn't take it well. Ava shut down. She used to be my chatterbox, always drawing comics, telling me about class drama, reading books out loud to Mason. Now she barely said a word. She stayed in her room longer, lost interest in her piano lessons, and stopped signing her name with a heart over the A. Cole became quiet too, but it was a different kind of quiet. Heavy. Brooding. I caught him in the garage one day kicking a bucket so hard it dented the side panel. When I asked what was wrong, he just said nothing and walked off. Mason asked the most questions. Always in that small voice of his. Is Mommy coming back? Why didn't she make my cereal this morning? When can I sleep in the big bed with her again? I never lied. But I softened the truth. She loves you, I'd say. She's just figuring things out. And slowly, painfully, they started to adjust. I packed lunches. I joined the PDA. I downloaded parenting podcasts like a madman and kept a color-coded calendar on the fridge with each kid's name, schedule, and needs. I was trying. Every single day. Then came the audit results. Andrew, our CFO, called me in late on a Tuesday. We finished the full review, he said. You need to see this. The numbers were worse than we thought. Hannah had funneled over $28,000 in personal expenses through company cards over the past year. Not all of it related to Jason either. Spa treatments, shopping trips, designer luggage, and in one case, a non-refundable deposit on a private event space in Savannah which she never used. Worse still, there were emails showing she'd pitched a potential spin-off brand concept to Jason privately, one they'd been developing without company knowledge. Using company time, company marketing resources. They'd tried to build a parallel venture behind my back. It never launched. But the intent was there. Rebecca added it to the legal file. We were no longer talking about divorce. We were talking about breach of contract, fiduciary misconduct, and potential fraud. I didn't want to destroy her. I didn't want to bury the mother of my kids. But I wasn't going to let her walk away clean either. Not after everything. Not after the family she fractured. The employees she lied to. The kids she left behind emotionally while pretending to play house with someone else. One day, I found a note tucked into Mason's backpack. It was a crayon drawing, stick figures holding hands. 3 people, me, Ava, Cole, and Mason. No fourth figure. No mom. He'd labeled us. My new home. I stood there in the laundry room, staring at that paper, heart cracked wide open. We weren't healed. Not even close. But somehow, in spite of everything, we were still here. Still standing.